Hello, everybody. My name is Robia, and I would like to welcome you to my very first podcast of Who Asked You? Who Asked You is a video podcast series that I'm creating that will answer frequently asked questions that I get from my clients and a lot of other tattoo artists get from their clients in hopes to answer those very frequently asked questions. So, a little bit about me. My name is Robia, like I said, and I got into the tattoo industry, well, I got around it when I was about 13 years old. My friend from high school, her father was a well known tattooer. And then years later, I became a piercer when I was about 21, 2001. That just told you all my age. And I started permanent cosmetics in 2003. And then I started tattooing in 2007. And I have been a shop owner of Two Face Tattoo in California since 2009. I decided to do this podcast series to answer frequently asked questions, mainly because, I was tired of answering the same questions over and over again. So originally I was just going to create some videos to go on my website and answer those questions before my clients came in and asked me those same questions. The whole idea started after I was doing a day of consultations with my clients. And I had about 3 people come in a row and ask me the exact same questions, almost in the exact same order. And I remember thinking at the end of the day, like, is this information not readily available on the internet? And so I started doing some digging around, and there really wasn't a lot of professional tattoo artists talking to their clients about these frequently asked questions. The questions that I was asked that day was, does it hurt? How much does it cost? Where should I put it? All in regards to their tattoos. And these questions are questions I get asked a lot, whether it's in the shop and doing consultations or whether I'm out in public, and people are talking to me about my tattoos. These are just really, really frequently asked questions. So I decided to put this podcast series together, Who Asked You? And Who Asked You, the name of the podcast series is, I chose that name because, well, nobody asked me. I just decided that this was something that I wanted to do. Being that I've been in the industry around, tattooing and piercing and all that stuff for, I guess, over 18 years now, I felt that I had at least enough background to give you guys some solid information and be able to at least address questions that I get on a regular basis. And I'm really hoping that it makes it a little less intimidating for clients to go into shops and, have a little bit more education behind them before attempting to get tattooed. And I'm also hoping that it really helps artists. If our clients are more informed, then we have less work to do. So that's kind of my goal here. And this is my first one ever, so you'll have to bear with me. I tend to tangent a little bit, and I've got a fair amount of information to give you today. So I'm going to do my best to stay on track, and we'll see how it goes. I hope you guys enjoy, and I hope it's informative for you. So the first thing I want to address in my first episode, I've decided to really start with the basics and gear myself towards talking to people who have either never been tattooed or really I decided to address the most frequently asked question I get, whether I'm in the shop or I'm out in public. And that question is, do tattoos hurt? I'm sure that there is a great handful of you out there rolling your eyes and going, really? This should be a very obvious answer. But, I get asked this question so often. Obviously, it's not an obvious answer. And I think that if you have never been tattooed, if you've never been into a tattoo shop, I think wondering if it hurts is a really valid question. And what I'll say is I think that when people are asking, does it hurt? I don't think they're asking if it hurts. I think they're really asking, how much is it going to hurt? What can I expect? And so I'm going to give you enough information so that you can kind of get a better understanding. The question, does it hurt, is kind of an unanswerable question. And it's unanswerable because it's so different for everybody. So to kind of go into this, I'll address a few things and hopefully give you guys at least enough information so that you can make an educated decision on whether or not you want to get tattooed based on pain alone. There's a lot of other reasons to get tattooed or not get tattooed. We'll go into that on other episodes. But for today, I just want to talk about pain, what you can expect, and maybe help you get a better understanding of what it's like to get tattooed. And for those people out there that are listening that, maybe you have a few tattoos, but your next one is going to be in an area that everybody says is painful. This can be some information for you as well. So, answering this unanswerable question. Again, I cannot give you a definitive answer. I can't say, do tattoos hurt? Yes. Do they hurt? No. I mean, overall, I would say yes. But again, how much does it hurt? So in order to really figure it out for yourself, let's talk about just pain in general for a second. How we deal with pain. Pain is super subjective. So it's different for everybody. Everybody's got their own pain tolerance, threshold. What hurts for me may not hurt for you, vice versa, and so on down the road for each individual. But what I think a lot of people get stuck on when it comes to dealing with pain is the idea of this is what's going to happen and it's out of my control. Pain, we have a lot of control over our pain. How we manage our pain is a big factor on how much something is or isn't going to hurt. If you're the type that stubs your toe and falls on the ground like Peter Griffin and holds your foot and for 45 minutes, maybe you've got a lower pain threshold than some others. But if you stub your toe and, give the old oh, fuck, and move on with your life, then chances are you're probably going to be okay. So it's the idea that pain is, I don't know, let's say I'm making up statistics here, 50% physical, because it is a physical thing. But really a lot of it is, maybe 50% mental. How we manage our pain is a big factor on how much things are going to hurt or how we see it. So, not to go into too much about just pain in general, but just to get a better understanding of why it's so different for everybody else, or for everybody, including yourself. Really, it's about how we manage pain more so than what's actually happening to our bodies and in our skin. So there's a part of it that's physical, but a part of it that's mental, and that mental aspect of it is really dependent on each individual. So, talking about factors that contribute to tattoo pain and what's associated with that. Typically, the bigger questions that I get is, what does it feel like? So, again, this is subjective. Everybody's going to give you a different answer, chances are. I've heard everything from cat scratch to bee sting, sandpaper, all sorts of different variations of what it felt like for each individual, and also what it feels like in different areas of the body. For me personally, I think it feels a lot like if you get a sunburn and you forget it's there, and the next day you reach over and scratch your sunburn, and it's kind of that burning, irritating, scratchy, scrapey feeling with a little bit of heat afterwards. For me, that's most of the time what it feels like. Overall, I would say that, we've all been, well, a lot of us have been scratched by a cat or stung by a bee, provided that you're not allergic. It's usually, it sucks, but it's tolerable at the end of the day. We're not talking about hospitalization pain. Hospitalization? Yeah. We're not talking about hospital pain. We're not talking about break your arm pain or severe burn pain or really gnarly scenarios. We're talking about moderate pain and how well you'll deal with that moderate pain. So other factors that are going to really go into a tattoo and how much it's going to hurt for you. One of the big things people talk about is placement on the body. Where should I put it? Where is it going to hurt less? And a lot of people ask me, where should I put my first tattoo? One of the things I just want to mention on that real quick is I always advise my clients, never choose the placement of your tattoo based on pain. You will feel that pain once, but you will live with that placement forever. So if you envision this tattoo in an area of the body that is typically more painful, I strongly recommend that, we suck it up, Sally, and get it in that spot, because again, you'll deal with it once, but you'll live with the placement for forever. So having said that, there are lots of people who will talk about different areas of the body that hurt more than others. Typically you'll hear, ribs are a real common one. Sternum is a real common one. Foot. And I'll tell you from my professional experience, and my personal experience on my own body, areas of the body that we think are going to be super painful sometimes aren't. And areas of the body that we think aren't going to be painful sometimes really are. And I've had people, like I would say ribs and sternum and, near joints, what we call the ditch, the inside of your arm here, behind the knee, near joints, elbows, that kind of stuff, are typically going to be more painful than other parts of the body, like the outer arm or forearm or, lower legs or thighs. But I've had clients that I've had clients that have cried through their ribs. I've had clients that have slept through their ribs. So there's definitely no 100% this is how it's going to be. And that's why it's such a difficult question to answer. Because it's so different for everybody. A lot of other factors besides just placement are, the size of the tattoo that you're getting. This is a big factor too. If you're getting a tiny little tattoo, especially if it's, black, solid black, or just some gray shading, you're going to be, in and out of the chair 15 minutes, 20 minutes, maybe an hour, depending on, the size of the piece that you're getting. You're not going to be managing pain very long. So typically when you're looking back on it later, you're dealing with it in the moment. When you're looking back on a 10-minute tattoo or a 20-minute tattoo or even an hour tattoo, it's not a long time to manage that pain. You're not going to deplete your endorphins. You're not going to deplete your pain management. So it's going to be a little bit easier. And speaking of, endorphins and that kind of stuff, if you're dealing with a larger tattoo or maybe even something that's still small but has a lot more color saturation to it, where you're going to be sitting there a little bit longer, typically when you start getting tattooed, the body will, just like with any pain experience, will go into a bit of a flight or fight response, which as you force yourself to sit there, the body will then release endorphins, and it will actually help you manage that pain better. So a lot of times when you're getting a tattoo that's, at least an hour or a couple hours long, the first 10 or 15 minutes will really hurt. But then as your body releases endorphins and your adrenaline runs, it's actually, your body will help you cope with the pain of the tattoo. Not always, because again, it's different for everybody. But in my experience, it's been that most of the time about 10 or 15 minutes into a tattoo, the client's like, oh, okay, this isn't so bad at all. And honestly, I get that most of the time anyway. Most of my clients, when they sit in my chair, especially first-time tattoo clients or people who have had maybe one or two small tattoos and now they're working on something bigger or they're going into a delicate area of the body, we get there and they're like, oh, this isn't nearly as bad as I had anticipated. And that's a lot of times because the fear of the unknown and the anticipation of something is far worse than actually what will happen when it's going on. So just, keep those things in mind when you're trying to decide whether or not getting a tattoo is something for you. So you've got size, you've got, black and gray versus color, or I should say really, you've got saturation versus just simple light shading. The more saturation something has, the more it's really covering every square inch of the skin with, going over it with a needle. So if you're dealing with an image that's like let's say a flower that's black and gray, the area of skin that's being shaded is much less. Where if you're going for something that's full color or solid color, solid black, solid color, doesn't really matter, the whole area is going to be saturated. So if you've got something, hit my microphone. So if you've got something this big that has a little bit of shading in it, then you're going to be in and out. The skin's not going to be really all that traumatized. If you've got something this big, same size, but yet every inch of that thing is colored in, then of course your skin's going to be a little more sore. It's having more trauma done to it. And I know trauma can be a heavy word to use, but take it in the lightest form possible. But it's experiencing more damage to that tissue in a small area versus something that's a lighter shading or no shading and just line work. You're in and out of that area and the skin isn't having as much trauma done to it. So these are all factors. So of course, the larger the piece, the more saturation the piece has, the longer you're not only going to be managing pain, but also the longer your body is going to be releasing those endorphins and so on. So as the pieces start to get bigger and bigger and bigger, your pain management at a certain point will kind of peak and then start to come down the other side. So like for me with my clients, I typically don't tattoo much longer than about 8 hours, depending on the circumstance. I will make exceptions, but I notice that when it gets to a point where you kind of hit that really long-term mark, people really stop being able to manage their pain. So just to kind of go back and reiterate on some of this, size, placement, detail, saturation, these are all aspects that will affect how much a tattoo hurts. Also different styles. And that goes back to like black and gray versus like big, bold, traditional. If you've got really heavy line work going in first and then shading on top of it, that can be a little less tolerable. But again, going back to the idea that, it's usually pretty tolerable. I have yet to have a client in all the years I've been tattooing, have a client come in to get tattooed, sit down and not complete their tattoo. I've never had anybody that's jumped out of the chair to the point where they couldn't finish. So, keeping that in mind with, trying to decide whether or not something's going to be crazy painful for you. Another aspect of it, and this, again, goes back to the mental aspect of it, is your emotional status. And I'll actually probably do another episode on the idea of getting tattooed when you're emotionally upset about something, whether it's like a memorial piece or a divorce or all that kind of stuff. That's kind of a whole other subject that way I can address another day. But your emotional state can play a factor on whether or not something hurts. For women, that time of the month can be a factor. I've experienced that in tattooing clients where I've had a client that came in and I've tattooed her multiple times, and one point she came in and it was that time of the month. She knows what I'm talking about, but I didn't mention her name. And her skin got really inflamed because of that. And we actually had to stop midway through there because her skin was reacting differently than it normally did. So that's a factor. Not to say that it's not a good idea to get tattooed then, but it can be a factor. So if that's a situation and you're coming in for your first time tattoo and all of a sudden it hurts like crazy, that may be a component. So yeah, we talked about, size and detail, placement, emotional status. All of these things play a role as to whether or not tattoos are going to hurt. What I will say is the overall consensus of most of my clients, it's pretty tolerable. So, like I said, I've never had anybody jump up out of my chair. I've never had anybody like scream. I know you guys have seen those videos online with people just screaming bloody murder, or wailing or whatever. I've witnessed it happen a couple of times in shops. I personally have not really experienced it with one of my clients. I find that most of the time, I hope to not really offend anybody here, but I find most of the time when that's happening, the person's just being dramatic. Honestly, I've yet to see anybody genuinely like really break down. And if it's something that's happened to you, I apologize if I wasn't being accepting of your circumstances. But my point here is that most of the time, 99% of the time in my experience, most people are pleasantly surprised, honestly, at how much it didn't hurt. And that seems to be the overall idea. And what I usually tell my clients is, if you look at me, I'm pretty heavily tattooed. I wouldn't look like this if it was that bad. I'm no offense to masochists, but I'm not really a masochist. So I don't enjoy pain. I don't love pain. So the fact that I can sit there and tolerate hours of tattoo work might suggest that it's really not so bad. I would say that I do have a fairly high pain tolerance. At the same time, I think most people have more of a pain tolerance than they even give themselves credit for. And again, going back to the idea that really most of the time, the anxiety or the anticipation of what's about to happen is far more severe than the actual pain that you're going to experience. So having said all that, I hope that this is at least enough to give you some information so that you can make an educated opinion as to whether or not a tattoo is right for you based on just pain alone. I thought I'd mention just real quick a couple of little tips. These are on my website as well, but a couple quick tips on how you can make a tattoo a little bit less painful. Drinking a lot of water. This is a common one that we talk about. Tattoo artists will tell their clients, drink a lot of water the day before. Having your skin hydrated will actually allow the ink to accept easier. If your skin's real dry and for lack of a better word, leathery, I guess, then it's going to be a little bit tougher for that needle to penetrate the skin, which will create more friction in your skin and actually cause the tattoo to be a little hotter and a little more burning. This is why like areas of the body, like the tops of our feet, especially the sides of our feet, the sides of our hands in this area, tend to be a little more burny for men, like the wrist skin and stuff like that, where the skin's tougher. Our elbows, that kind of stuff tends to be a little more burny. You're actually experiencing more friction. The needle is having a hard time penetrating the skin, and as it is, it's creating more friction, creating more heat. That's typically why, like my knuckles in this area right here, they burned. It actually felt burny. So I'm not a tattoo scientist per se, but that's been my experience that's a thing. So having your skin hydrated and having your skin be supple is definitely a bonus. Maybe using lotion on your skin for a few days before your tattoo, that kind of stuff can help. And then again, staying hydrated. Also being well rested is a big factor on how well you're going to mentally deal with your pain. So get a good night's sleep before you get tattooed. Maybe don't go out drinking the night before and come in all fucking hell hungover. Really just, kind of, if you're worried about it, prepare for your tattoo appointment, and just be well rested and, well maintained. Also, make sure before your tattoo appointment that you eat. I can't tell you how many times I get clients that come in and they have not eaten a meal and they're coming in for a 4-hour piece or a 5-hour piece. And when your body's already depleted because it's hungry, it's definitely not going to manage pain as well. Also, there is a factor of people passing out when their blood sugar drops, typically due to the anxiety of the anticipation. But as a piercer, I experience that far more than I ever do as a tattoo artist. But that's a big factor. If you're coming in on an empty stomach, your body is just not going to have the fuel to manage that pain. So that's really probably one of the more important pieces of advice I can give you on dealing with getting tattooed is make sure you eat before and maybe bring a snack. So yeah, I think that pretty much covers just about everything. If there's something that you feel that I missed in this video, please feel free to shoot me a message. Excuse me. Please feel free to shoot me a message. You can comment on here and ask me anything that you'd like. I'd be more than happy to answer any additional questions. I want to thank you once again for taking a moment to listen to my podcast. I will be doing podcasts. I'll try to do them once a week. And like I said, if you have any questions, if you're a client or as a tattoo artist, if there's something that you would like me to address or you would like to address, I'd be more than happy to interview any artist that would like a platform to talk to clients. So yeah, thank you very, very much for coming and hanging out with me on my very first podcast. I hope it was informative and I look forward to seeing you guys again soon. Thank you very much.